Good evening, class. My name is Robert Ortiz. I am currently a senior at Roosevelt University. I picked for my research proposal the rise of police suicide. Why I picked police suicide? It's an upcoming, more drastic thing that we as society are not really paying attention at. Police suicide is constantly rising, so I thought it was a great way to show that police officers are not alone and there's other people and other ways that you can kind of step away from when thinking about police suicide. So, why I picked police suicide? I'm currently a law enforcement officer in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. I've been a law enforcement officer for about 6 months now. The job is kind of difficult. You have your good days and your bad days, just like any other job. It's more difficult because we don't see the same things every day. We're always dealing with different types of incidents or possible deaths or car accidents or just different types of crimes that people have just been victims of, and we're there to try to help them, and sometimes it's not easy for us to help them when they're in a state of crisis. So for my introduction, I use two diagrams. My first diagram on the left is the one that's more descriptive. It was in 2014. In 2014, there was a total of 322 suicides by police officers. The more common type of police suicide is off duty. You do see sometimes in the news that police officers are committing suicide in their police cars while they're on duty, and just different. Usually they commit suicide in the police cars, but when they're committing suicide off duty, you can see that over 100 times that they committed suicide in their homes, which is a very high number. In the middle section, you can see the method that they used to commit suicide. So the first one would be using their service weapon. And over 100 of those suicides were used with their service weapon. So when we're talking about service weapon, we're talking mainly about the weapon that police officers use on a daily basis on their belt. When not using a firearm, hanging is the next type of suicide used. Hanging is only at a low of 18. So it's not that big of a number, but it's still what we say a bad number. I mean, you don't really want to see police suicides at all because there's so many resources that we can use, and it's so easy for us to get away from actually committing suicide. So, for my importance of the topic, like I said, I am a fellow officer. I kind of want to help my colleagues better themselves. So, with this research proposal, it will show them that they're not, that there's more out there than what they think is out there. So, another thing that I think is important is that officers need to be aware of mental health and personal wellness. That's really a big thing in the academies nowadays. They actually have classes set that talk about mental health and personal wellness and how we can kind of change the way we do things, and how the mindset of back then and now is completely different. And the last importance of my topic is that officers are not alone. There's so many other officers that might even be in your same department, that might be across from you, or that might even be in a completely different type of setting. But we're not alone. We call it the thin blue line, which represents like all of us, like united. Not really against other people, but more of we're united and we'll always be together. So for my literature review, I picked two main topics, which is post-traumatic stress disorder and officer wellness. For post-traumatic stress disorder, it's defined as a disorder in which a person has difficulty recovering after experiencing or witnessing a terrifying event. So when you're talking about terrifying events, you're talking about deaths, police involved shootings, car accidents, just any type of event that's very chaotic and can be more of like a cluster. When we're talking about officer wellness, it is considered what officers do during a normal day and how it can trigger different mental states, including depression. Mental health is often overlooked. It's an often looked component of officer safety and wellness. Policing is undoubtedly a highly stressful occupation for us, and suicides are a sad result. Compared with the general population, police officers face a significantly higher risk of experiencing threatening situations, violence, and traumatic events, such as, like I said, attending death scenes and fatal accidents. I mean, these are common, sometimes not a daily thing, but a weekly thing. I mean, one day police officers can be sitting in their car just talking with a loved one or being on their phone, and then the next second you're arriving to a domestic violence where the husband or the wife has battered their partner, and it's just it's gruesome. You need to get the paramedics there. It's just a big thing. So the two research questions I picked were, what characteristics do police officers experience that cause them to commit suicide? And my second one is, do officers have PTSD? And if so, would they get help from the psychiatrist or some type of mental health professional? So for my first one, the characteristics are like what I explained before, PTSD and officer wellness. Why are these the two biggest? It's because police officers don't want to get help from these professionals when they need the help. It's more of a, I'm a macho man and I think I'm tough and I don't need their help. But in reality, we are suffering so much and it's such a high stressful job that we need some type of way of to de-stress, and we're not doing that. For my second question, do officers have PTSD, and if so, would they ever get help? So with my interviewee James, he's been a police officer for 25 years in the Chicago Police Department. He works with the gang organized crime task unit, so he more focuses on gang crime. So he stated that James stated that back in the day, if an officer wanted to get help from other officers or would want to get help from other mental health professionals, other coworkers would look at them in disgust and believe that they're too weak for the job. But like I said, that was back then. So back then you had to be a tough guy, because if you were looked like you were the weak one, it was more difficult for you to actually be in the job and be focused. So many of these police officers didn't want to get help because they didn't want to get made fun of or other types of mockery. For my other interviewee, Jorge's been a police officer for 3 months. He recently just got out of the academy. I've known Jorge for a little bit. Was we work together right now. He told me that during when you're in the academy, you're you have like different types of ways to you have different types of way of getting help. So in the police academy, they say it's okay for officers to get help if need be. There's nothing wrong with getting help, and I totally agree with that. There's nothing wrong with getting help. That back then of being a macho man is you actually being weak. The people that actually get help from these mental health professionals and try to better themselves are the guys that we need to be more in policing. I apologize for that. So, again, for my methodology, I used semi-structured interviews. I interviewed 3 police officers. The first one was James. The second one was Jorge. And the third police officer is Charles. They all have different types of backgrounds. James has been a police officer for 25 years. Charles has only been a police officer for 5 years, and Jorge has only been a police officer for 3 months. I'm sorry. So the different types of backgrounds kind of helps this research proposal more extensively, because now you have three different guys that have three different ways of policing, which James is the type of older style police officer of, you need to be a macho man and you need to be different than what it is now. And Jorge's the more newer police officer that they have the training of helping each other and becoming better police officers with officer wellness and getting rid of this PTSD and trying to get help from mental health professionals. So for my results, I picked two. I picked James and Jorge. I thought they were the two ones that were more focused on this police suicide and more intrigued on my research proposal. So for James, he stated that it's hard dealing with trust when you're dealing with gang members every day and them committing crimes and having a different type of background than what you're used to. For Jorge, it's he already has a tough perspective on the criminal justice system. In the state of Cook County, Kim Fox is the state's attorney. It's very difficult for police officers to kind of do their job correctly when we have a state's attorney that more than likely just gives like a slap on the wrist for these offenders who are committing crimes. So, or he actually stated, what's the point of doing our job if you can't even do your job correctly? Or the state's attorney's office is more of, they want to do it their way, even though there's another way. And I understand there's people that when they commit felonies, that it's an accident for them. But when you're committing felonies day after day after day and you're just getting a slap on the wrist every time, there has to be something changed about it. And for my conclusion, and my policy implications, the two that my policy implications that I think need to be better are police officers need to have better resources within their own police department. So they need to have administration in their police departments to have their backs. So when you're talking administration, you're talking about the higher brass people, so your chiefs, your deputy chiefs, your captains, your commanders of the police department. They need to have your back when you're dealing with these types of mental health issues and they need to put their hand out more of the say. Would also help police officers if they would get more training on these types of issues that we're having nowadays. And then for my other one is officers need a support group. So when you're talking about support group, I'm not talking about a group of officers coming in with a psychiatrist that doesn't know anything about the job. So officers need to be in a group with other officers that maybe a psychiatrist that knows about policing or they've been a police officer before, which would help police officers and their struggles. So when you have a group of police officers that talk about with each other and know each other, it's easier for them to kind of open up about what they're struggling about. So, and like I said, you can't just have police officers that are kind of mental health professionals that never been police officers, because you can't talk to people that are not police officers and they don't it's very difficult for society to relate to police officers because they haven't been on the job and they don't know what's going on in the job to kind of help them. And my conclusion for my research proposal is that law enforcement is not a normal job. You don't sign up for it and try to kind of better the world. We more try to make a difference in people's lives. That's what I like to put away, because everybody could say, oh, I want to help people, but who are you going to help if you can't even help yourself? So that's my biggest thing. Like I said, police officer is not the same job as a desk job. I'm not really ripping on people that have desk jobs because that's why we need these people. But it's just two different careers that are two different ways of doing a job. And I appreciate everybody listening into my slideshow. That is the conclusion of my slideshow. If you guys have any questions, you guys can always feel free to contact me about anything with policing or my data that I use or just anything that maybe can help you understand policing more than what other people don't really know about it. Thank you.